Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to unpack a truly wild series of events, a perfect storm, really, for the Trump administration. We're talking about what happens when big political gambles just fail, one after another.
So, you gotta ask, right? How does a supposedly calculated political strategy just blow up in your face and so fast? Let's get into it.
Okay, so here's the game plan. We're going to follow the dominoes as they fall. First, a plan in Congress that goes sideways. Then, a sharp rebuke from the courts. After that, a huge indictment that completely unravels. And finally, we'll look at how the voters reacted to all of it.
All right, first up, a plan gone wrong. Our story kicks off with a bill that, honestly, almost everyone wanted to see pass, the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Sounds straightforward, right? Well, behind the scenes, there was a secret plan to make sure it died a quiet death.
Okay, just look at how fast this all happened. The plan was simple. Let the House pass this thing, then send it over to the Senate to get buried under a pile of amendments. Basically, kill it slowly. But that plan just exploded. What was supposed to take weeks or months fell apart in like 48 hours. The Senate, well, they weren't playing along. And you don't have to take my word for it. This quote from Speaker Mike Johnson, it says everything. He's basically admitting, right there on the record, that their whole plan backfired. They got completely steamrolled, and it all happened right out in the open.
This is just, wow. Talk about political whiplash. For months, they were trying to secretly kill this bill. Then, they get completely outmaneuvered by Congress. So what do? A complete 180. They turn around and act like signing it into law was their brilliant idea all along. The pivot is just incredible.
And as if that wasn't enough, the story just kept getting more complicated. It wasn't just about the bill. At the same time, other bombshells started dropping. You have this email from Epstein to Steve Bannon that surfaces, then a report about the White House intervening for Andrew Tate. And to top it all off, the Attorney General suddenly announces an investigation, but only into Democrats named in the files. A lot of people saw that as a really obvious attempt to just change the subject.
Okay, so the bad news is piling up. Let's shift gears now, because while all that drama was unfolding in Washington, another major setback was brewing, this time coming from the federal courts.
So down in Texas, the plan was to redraw the congressional map. The goal? To pretty much guarantee Republicans 5 new seats in the 2026 midterms. It was a huge part of their long-term strategy. But then, a panel of 3 federal judges just slammed the brakes on the whole thing.
So you might be asking, why did the court block it? Well, the state's argument was, hey, this is just politics. We're just favoring our party, which, believe it or not, is often allowed. But the court, and this is key, including a Trump appointee, said, nope, this crosses a line. They called it what it was, illegal racial gerrymandering. You can't draw these maps just to water down the votes of a specific racial group. That's unconstitutional.
And get this, the dissenting opinion from one of the judges wasn't really a legal argument at all. It was more like a political tirade, name-dropping George Soros and Gavin Newsom. It's a really stark example of just how politicized some of these judicial decisions have become.
All right, now for what might be the most dramatic part of this whole 48-hour mess. We're talking about the public collapse of a really high-stakes, politically loaded prosecution. The target? Former FBI Director James Comey.
You just have to look at how this whole thing started to see the red flags. First, a career prosecutor looks at the case and says, yeah, there's not enough here. But then, the president publicly calls for an indictment. Suddenly, that prosecutor is out, and they're replaced by a White House aide, someone with literally zero experience as a prosecutor. And what happens? Days later, boom, there's an indictment. It just doesn't look good.
So they get to court, and the whole thing just implodes. A judge starts pointing out huge, staggeringly wrong problems. It turns out the prosecutor might have misled the grand jury about evidence, she might have tried to flip the burden of proof onto Comey, and then, this is wild, it comes out that only 2 grand jurors ever even saw the final indictment. It was a complete and total legal train wreck.
And then, just when you think it can't get any crazier, a prosecutor on the team makes a shocking admission in open court. He says there's a memo explaining why the case had no merit in the first place, and that he was told by the Deputy Attorney General's office not to reveal it. That's a jaw-dropping moment. It points to a potential cover-up at the very top of the Justice Department.
You know it's serious when James Comey's lawyer, a guy who is a legal legend, he's argued more than 100 cases before the Supreme Court, stands up and just says, this has to stop.
He wasn't just defending his client, he was making a powerful plea, arguing this whole thing was a politically motivated abuse of power that had to be shut down, period.
So let's recap. We've got a legislative plan that backfired, a major court defeat, and a high-profile legal case that just exploded on the launch pad, all within about 2 days. The big question is, what did the public think of all this? How did it land politically?
Well, the first signs were not good. A brand new Marist poll came out, and it was a real gut punch for the administration. When voters were asked who they'd prefer in the 2026 midterms, Democrats suddenly had a huge 14-point lead.
And to put that 14-point number into perspective, just look at this. A year ago, the two parties were dead even, 48 to 48. Now, there's a 14-point gap. That is a massive swing in public opinion in a really, really short amount of time.
And you might think, okay, maybe it's just one poll, right? An outlier. Nope. Another poll, this one from Reuters/Ipsos, showed the exact same trend. The president's own approval rating had also dropped, continuing its slide downhill.
So, when you put it all together, it leaves us with a really big question. Was this crazy 48-hour period just a temporary storm, bad couple of days that will blow over? Or are we seeing a real fundamental shift in the political weather?
That's all for this explainer. Thanks for joining us to understand the deeper story behind the headlines.